Okay, so this is a demo of InDesign, and what we're going to be doing tonight is creating this poster right here. And this will basically be a walkthrough of your project too, how you can set up your InDesign file, and I'll go through some steps on how to place photos and how to handle text and things like that. So just so you can see, this is the finished poster, and this is what we'll be creating tonight. This is the underlying grid. And we'll go through and we'll create all this. And I'll actually I'm gonna create a brand new document so we can start fresh, but I want you to see where we're going to end up. And this is about 285 words or so. So this is about the amount of text that needs to be on your poster as well. Let's start fresh, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to close this document so that you can see kind of where we start from. So when you open up InDesign, you won't have any of these recent files unless you've been in the program before. And what you want to do is you want to come over here to the left-hand side and click Create New. And it's going to pop open a new document window. I'm going to get it to a default so you can see where it starts. So over here on the right-hand side of this new document window, we want to change our width and our height to 11 by 17, which is the size of our poster. We want to uncheck facing pages. And for this demo, I'm going to leave everything else at the default. We'll go in and we'll change it a little bit later. I want you to be able to know where to change it beyond this screen. So we're going to leave our page count at 1 and everything else. So we're just changing 11 by 17 and we're unchecking facing pages. And we're just going to go ahead and hit Create. So this is what we get, and if you haven't done so already, please go through the Adobe tutorial on InDesign to get your layout of the software. They do a very good job on walking you through the basics of InDesign. So with this open, we're going to go to our Pages panel, which on my InDesign is over on the right-hand side here. You can go up to Window and come down to Pages and check it, and it will pop up within your work area. What I want to do is I want to come over here and I want to double click on a master. So if we look in our pages, we have these thumbnails down here, and then we have these other smaller thumbnails up top. So we're going to go into our master page, and this master page allows us to set up usually our grid system or any other element that we want to appear on every single page of our document. For right now, we're just going to double click on a master, and you want to make sure that the text is reversed out in blue and our little page is highlighted. That means that we're actually editing this page, and that will become very important when we come back to page 1. Now on the A master, we're going to come up to Layout, and we're going to go to Margins and Columns. And this is going to open up this window right here. And for this project, or for the purpose of this demo, I want to set my margins to 1/4 of an inch, which is 0.25. And when this chain link is clicked, like it is now, it adjusts it on all 4 sides of the paper. And the reason I'm putting in 1/4 of an inch on my poster is that we're going to be printing these out in the lab next door. And those printers don't print edge to edge. They don't print a bleed. So they'll leave about 1/4 of an inch all the way around our document. And unless we dictate that margin in our document and purposefully leave it white, it is going to automatically put a white border of some sort around our poster. So we might as well go ahead and define what that white border looks like so we can control it in our design. Next, we want to put in our columns, and I'm going to do a 6-column grid. So I want my gutter to be 0.1875, and I want to have 6 columns. And you'll see I have preview checked so we can actually see it putting in our columns. And I want 6 columns on my poster. But next, we need to come up and go to Layout, Create Guides. And we're going to zoom in here. And we want to make sure we fit our guides to our margin. So it's actually going to bring guides in from a 1/4 inch in and stop at a 1/4 inch on the top and the bottom. Okay. And we want to make sure our gutter is the same as our columns. And we're only doing the rows here. And you see that there are columns here as well. But I want to show you both ways of doing this. Because sometimes we only need columns and then we later want to put in rows. So we always want to create columns this way and then put the guides in separately. So with the rows, I actually want 10 rows. And you can see here that it will put those in because preview is checked. And I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to zoom back out. Now that we have our guides set up, this is our modular grid. In other words, it gives us different modules and various touch points to work from. I want to come back over to my Pages panel. And I want to go back and I now want to actually design on my page 1. So what I can do, and the reason I mentioned that you want to make sure that your text is highlighted out, reversed out in blue, is because I can come down here and select page 1, but I am not working on page 1. I have just selected that. To actually make sure that I'm working on it, I need to double click on it, make sure the 1 is reversed out in blue, and the page is highlighted. So now I know I am working on page 1 and not the master page. Okay, so what I want to do now is everything in InDesign must go in a box of some sort. And one thing I want to check, and I would encourage you guys, if you haven't already, there's a video about preferences and setting up preferences. I would watch that video on the InDesign preferences, and I'll leave a link in the description of this video. But if you go into that video, you'll see how I have my preferences set up. The one thing I want you to make sure that you have set, definitely, is if you go to InDesign Preferences Type, and this is all on the Mac. On the PC, I think it's under Edit Preferences. You want to make sure that Type Tool Converts Frames to Text Frames is unchecked. That's the one preference I am going to point out in this demo. But please go and look at the other video to find out what all the other preferences that I have set up in my own personal InDesign. So with that thinking, I want to bring you over to Photoshop, where I've already created an image that I'm going to use in the poster. And this is what I mean by using supporting software. So InDesign is going to be our main piece of software where we organize everything, that we actually create the layout for our poster. That doesn't mean I can't come into Photoshop and create, in this case, this image of the Dalai Lama, and to add a little bit of insight as to who this individual is, who this man is, and it fits very nicely with the image that I have. So I have created this in Photoshop, and I have saved my Photoshop file. And now I'm ready to bring it into my InDesign file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my toolbar, and you can choose either one of these. This is called the frame tool, and this is called the rectangle tool. Either or works. You will notice that my default stroke and fill color is set to null. By default, it's set to nothing and a stroke of black. So you want to make sure that any shape that you draw does not have a black outline around it, because by default it will. So you want to make sure that that is turned to nothing if you don't want a stroke. So I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to come to the upper left hand corner of my margin. So where I have a 1/4 inch margin, right where that purple rectangle starts, I'm going to click there and I'm going to drag out a rectangle. Can do this and it will snap to my guides, and now I have a rectangle. And it, if I unselect it, you can't see that it's there because it has no fill, it has no stroke, but it is there. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go up to File, Place. This is Command D on a Mac or Control D on a PC. And we are going to, I have a folder already created here, Demo 3. I have an Images folder, and this would be a good way to organize your working folder. Images, and then I have my Dalai Lama PSD file, and I just want to click Open. And you'll notice right away that this image has come out it's very pixelated, and you'll say, wait a minute, in Photoshop it's not pixelated. You are correct. What InDesign does is, because it's meant to handle multiple pages, say you're designing a 300-page college textbook that has 150 images, all which have to be displayed at high res, it is going to take any computer and cause it to lag horribly. So what InDesign does is it shows you the image in a lower resolution so that it can run smoothly. But don't fear, there is a way to look at it in high res, and I will show you that in a moment. So I do want it scaled down, so there's a number of things I could do. At the very top of my screen, the second one from the left, fit content proportionately. There is a fit content to frame, fit frame to content. Well, what we want to do is we want to make sure it's proportionate, so we're just going to click that. And you see that it shrunk it all the way down, and that's not what I want. But that's a really quick and easy way to get my content proportionately scaled. But in this instance, I do want it to fill my frame. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to hold down Shift and Option and just scale it back out. And I want to point something out to you when once I have this done. So let's get it into a resolution that we can all be comfortable with. So if you click on the frame and you right click and you come down to display performance, and you can do high quality display, and you'll notice that that will sharpen up really nicely. And now we don't have to worry about our brain being confused on whether or not it's high res enough. One of the things I want to point out is I'm in preview mode, and I'm switching between preview mode and normal mode by hitting W on the keyboard. But when we're working with the image, you'll notice when I roll over my box, the frame that I put my image in, you'll see that circle come up. If I roll over top of that, my arrow turns into a hand. When that happens, if I click right now, you'll notice that there's a orange or brown box that comes up. That is the image. At this point, I am moving the image within my frame. And if I go to the corners up here, and we have to remember to hold down Shift because we want to scale it proportionately, I am scaling the image. And this is important to understand, because you can also come and select the frame. So when you have a blue outline, you have the frame. And if I adjust the frame, then I can crop the photo differently. For example, if I want to move the image, include it the frame, I would click until I got the blue outline, and I can move that around my page. If I want it to move the image around inside the frame, I want to come and roll over the circular element until I have the brown or the brown outlines, and then move it around my frame. So there's two different ways to move images in InDesign. You always need a container to hold your images, which is, in this case, is the rectangle that I drew onto our page. So I drew a container, and then I placed inside that container, I placed our image. Now our image is larger than the container, so some of our image is not visible. But we can select the image while it lives inside the container and move it so we can see more of the image, or scale it down if we want to see more of the image. So let's go ahead and get this back to the size that we want it set to. So back to our margins, and I'll take this and I'll get it centered, and then I'm just going to enlarge this up. I'm holding down Shift to make sure I scale it proportionately. And when you have your image selected, you can come up to this little window right here, and this shows us our percentage. And you can see these two percentages should always be the same, and when they're linked, they should always be the same. So if I put that to 85, it just switches it to 85. So now I have the image that I created in Photoshop centered on my page, within my frame, within the container, and I'm ready now to add text. So I'm going to go back to my grid view. So what I want to do is I now want to add text. And I'm going to draw a text box I'm going to come over to my toolbar and grab the letter T, just like in Illustrator. And I'm going to click and drag out a line to the left-hand most part of one column and end on the other side of the column. It's going to spread 4 columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to Word. So I have this text. And like I said, this is about 280 words exactly. I'm going to copy that text and I'm going just to paste it into my text box. One of the things I want to do is I want to take my text box and I'm switching back to my selection tool, which is V on the keyboard again. And I'm going to come up to this right up here, this little jail cell or the number of columns. And I'm going to change this to 2. The decimal point below it, I want that to be the same as what my gutters are on my guides. Change that to 0.1875. And so that now that matches, and it's automatically spread my text over into 2 columns. Now let's change that text color into white so you can see the difference. And if we come up here into our swatches, you'll notice that the T is highlighted. And that means we're editing the text. And that's important to know because right now I have the text selected, but say I had my selection tool and I selected the text box and I came over here, I want to leave this on screen so you can see it, I can actually change the color of my text box. So what we need to do is we need to make sure our fill color is none and switch over to our type where the text is highlighted, and then we can change our type to white. So there's a few more changes I want to make to this. Number 1 being the font, number 2, the size, leading, and a space after. So what I'm going to do is with the T selected, I want to come up and I want to adjust my space after. So what a space after is everywhere that I hit return in my text, it will put a certain measurement after that hard return. So if I increase this to a 1/16 of an inch, if you watch right here, it will actually increase the space after. So I think I'm pretty happy at 1/8 of an inch. And next I want to change my font, and I'm going to change that to Europa, regular. And then I want to change my type size from 12 point to 10 point, and my leading to 15. The other thing I want to do is if I zoom in, I want to make sure that the inner world is a product of collaboration with. That paragraph starts at the top of the column up there. So I'm going to just take my text box and drag it up so that it knocks it up to the top. So now we have that. And we can go back and forth between the two by hitting W just to double check our work. So next, I want to have a headline, something that ties in the information, the Dalai Lama at the top, to our text at the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another text box. And I'm going to type in His Holiness, comma, the 14th. Which is actually the start of this first sentence. And what I want to do is I want to come up and I'm going to change my type. And I'm doing that up here with the A selected. I'm changing my type. And I'm gonna choose a typeface called Liberator, light. And the size of this is going to be 53 point. And if we select it, you'll notice that the H is not quite to the edge there. And so what I want to do, so I want to select this stuff and go up to my tracking up here. It's just below the word optical. Yours may say metrics, and I'm going to type in 5. And that should get it a little close, maybe 6, or maybe let's do 7. And I'm trying to get the edge of the H onto the edge of this column right here, the ending of this column. But I don't want it in black and I don't want it in white. So what I think will be really nice is to pull this gold color from his sash. So if I come over here and I take the eyedropper tool with the type selected, And I just roll over here and I'm going to try to get a light gold. And I'm watching the color in my swatches that I have open and also on the left-hand side in the T. And I'm going to select that. So we have this really nice gold color. So what happens here, now we're using color to help guide our eye as well. So we have this large Dalai Lama in the background that's light enough to catch our eye, the prayer for texture, and then the gold sash brings this down here and we can start reading the text. So the next thing I want to do is we have of peace down here on one line. I might try to afford myself a little bit more room in this paragraph by adjusting the tracking of these words to bump of peace up one line. So let's go up here, and on top we have our kerning, right below it we have our tracking, and we're just going to put that to -10 and see what that does. So I've gained a little bit more room, and what I want to see now is if I come here and I move these down so they still align to my grid, if this right here is enough room, and I think it is. So one thing I may want to do is I may want to add like a little thing down here that says, you know, everything's final, it's done, it ends right here. And I'm just going to draw a stroke kind of in the center here. And I'm going to take my eyedropper tool and I'm going to try to grab this this yellow. Hopefully that will work. And what I want to do is I want to come over into my stroke here. I'm going to move this down so you guys can see a little bit better. And in the stroke, I can actually have starts and ends. So I'm just going to do a circle solid on both ends. And scroll back out and click off of it. And then I have this little guy here. I want to get it centered in the column. And so another quick thing is that we put in a space after. So if you're typesetting this, right, and we want to break, say, had down to the next line, we have added 1/8 of an inch of a space after. That means if I hit a return, if I just hit enter on the keyboard, it's going to put that 1/8 of an inch in between two paragraphs. So in order just to knock that down a single line, I want to hit shift return. That's that soft return. Soft return just knocks it down to the next line. And you're basically telling InDesign, ignore the space after. So for the purposes of the demo, this is complete. So again, just for a recap, we have the large Dalai Lama. We could certainly go back into Photoshop and make that pop a lot more if we want it to. I'm fine with it. It has some nice texture. Then we're using the prayer, the Tibetan prayer in the background as texture, just more texture. Type as image. And we're using the yellow from this sash to bring our eye down for our headline or our leader into our paragraph. We've set our paragraph in 10-point type over 15, so a little bit more leading to make it more legible. Set it in white, made sure that it is legible on the image itself. That's been a quick demo in InDesign. Thanks for your time.